And welcome. It's Ari Rosenbaum here at that 401k virtual bunch. My guest today is Theresa Conti from Sunwest Pensions. I always say Southwest, so I made sure that, I always get Southwest on my mind. I don't know why. Luckily, I didn't do it today. But before that 401k virtual conference is tomorrow, 12 noon. We do another one November 20th, 2 weeks from today. We do another virtual bunch with John Rustin, CPA from Pension Assurance. So he'll be the first auditor that we talk to on one of these. And then that 401k National Virtual Conference is in January with special guests Walt Frazier and Dwight Gooden. So that's it. Go to that 401ksite.com to sign up for that national event. $20, 21 cents to sign up on the early bird. So Theresa, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today? Thanks for having me.
I can't complain. I mean, I would, but nobody would really listen. How did you start in the 401k plan business? It's always because when people ask me that, I always say that's the first job I got. That's it.
Yeah, it's the first job I got right out of college. I got hired by a firm to work in their defined contribution unit because I was good at math. So yeah, and I've been here ever since. 30 years later, I've been here ever since.
But you started out in, you're native from Pennsylvania?
I'm a native from Pennsylvania. So my first job was actually in Philadelphia, in Center City, Philadelphia, the country girl going to Center City, Philadelphia every day to work for a big consulting firm. Yeah, and I loved it. And, I've loved this business for the 30 years I've been in it. So yeah, I don't have any regrets about that. So.
And then you started the firm Sunwest in 1998. How did you go and decide that you no longer wanted to work for people and you wanted to go out on your own?
Yeah, great question. So when I lived in Pennsylvania still right out of college and I grew up there, I worked for two different firms in Pennsylvania. And then my husband and I decided that we wanted a lifestyle change. East Coast is different and we loved Phoenix so much. So we decided to move to Phoenix. When I moved to Phoenix, I was working for a firm. They were a national firm. And then they had a small office here in Phoenix. They hired me to run their Phoenix office. I worked in that office for a few years. But, I was doing everything for that office. And I'm like, if I'm doing this, why don't I just start my own TPA firm? Why don't I just do my own thing? It was always really one of my goals to start my own business. And I was like, if I'm going to do it, my husband has a really great job. This is the time of my life to do it. So I did that. And then I think the other thing I had to consider was, how do you get business, right? As a TPA, you don't typically market directly to clients. You go through financial advisors. So making all those relationships and that took quite a while. So what I did in the meantime to sustain myself was I did work for other TPAs. I kind of did outsourced TPA work. So I contacted a couple big bundled record keepers and some other TPAs, and I did a fair amount of work for them, especially during busy time. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was working on building my own practice. So it probably took me we started in 98. It probably took me a good 3 or 4 years to really have enough of my own clients to sustain myself. Right. But doing that work for others also helped me a lot to, figure out what I wanted to do in my own practice and what I didn't want to do. And I was by myself. I didn't have any employees at that time. So it was pretty easy.
Yeah, it had to be more difficult in 1998 because I think in 2020, social media,
Right.
LinkedIn, you can be,
Right.
shoot some really witty videos and all of a sudden, wow, they're amazing, what people can do. I mean, without
100%.
Yeah, without the social media, I mean,
Yep.
I'd be somewhere. I wouldn't say a street corner, but I don't know what I'd be doing without social media.
Well, and as we all know, in business, it's all about relationships and contacts. And, I had enough of those that I could reach out to people and say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is my experience. What do you need help with? And so that really did help me a lot. I mean, you still had it. It was just a lot harder. You had to make phone calls, and you had to, do all that kind of stuff. And there were, times, because my office was in my house, which at that time was, crazy. In today's world, that's perfectly fine. But sometimes you'd have a fax machine going off at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's when we still had fax machines. So, lots of different stuff going on. That's way different today. But it really kind of worked. It obviously clearly all worked out. So, yeah.
Yeah, you started in 98, your own firm, which of course we discussed earlier. This is the year I started. What do you miss about those days, and what do you think has like drastically improved? Because I'm always fascinated by it, because it's like it's like you tell stories. Oh, when I was 20 years old, younger, I had to deal with whatever.
Yeah. Well, like we were kind of talking about it a little bit before, like contributions to the plan, right? Payroll contributions, deferrals. We used to get a file from the plan sponsor. We used to have to run it through the system, split it, send them back a form so that they could send their check to the record keeper, right? In today's world, we'd never meet the deposit guidelines. We'd never do any of that. Distributions and loan, we had a ton of balanced forward plans in those days, clearly. I mean, that was what a lot of people did, where you only valued them once a quarter, where participant distributions took, they had to wait till the end of the quarter, and then we had to do the val, and then they could get their distribution. The only types of plans you see that in now in today's world, in my mind, is profit sharing type plans, right? Where they may be profit sharing only and have a pooled account. But
yeah, because money purchase plans kind of went out with 2002 with the extra, with the repeal of the deductibility on profit sharing plans from 15 to 25.
Right. So
what do you like that was the 98 that you don't have now?
Well, that's kind of a tough question. I don't know. I think that in some ways business was easier, right? People talked more. Like now it's just all email and that kind of stuff. And I tend to be a phone and a person. Like I don't mind doing Zoom. Don't get me wrong. It gives you a lot of flexibility, but I miss the interaction that I have with people when I go to conferences, and being able to go out and meet and talk with people. So I think it's just a different, I had to figure out now how to market myself and Sunwest Pensions differently than I did back in 1998. So I don't know whether it's better or worse. It's just different, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I miss those events. Hopefully I get to another baseball stadium one of these days. You were with me.
I love the baseball stadiums. I love the Dodger Stadium.
Denver and Dodger Stadium. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, and hopefully I get back to it. I have all these events that I had in 2020 that I was supposed to have that I have to reschedule for 2021, and hopefully we can have it. Yeah. What are the issues that, let's face it, sometimes it feels like a male-dominated business. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's a male-dominated business, but as a male, it's not. It's hard for me to understand, because I'm not a female, and some of the maybe issues that you had to deal with, especially since it's been 30 years, and the industry and I think society is a lot different than it was 30 years ago. I mean, what are some of the issues that that you've had to deal with, and
Yeah, and I think this is true for all women business owners in general, no matter what business they're in, right? Women just have a different perspective. And I'm part of a lot of women's groups, and I work in an industry where most of my competitors are male owned, not woman owned, clearly. And it's just kind of a different thought process for women. What I've learned over the years is we think differently. Like, whereas you, Ari, might just go out and ask somebody, well, why aren't you sending me business? Why don't you use my firm? Why are you using XYZ firm? We won't do that. We take a different approach to it, and just trying to prove we're the best. And we don't tend to ask, and that's a woman thing, is what I've kind of discovered over the years. But I think in a lot of ways, being a business owner, especially in this market, has been an advantage. I mean, I get to work with a lot of great women and a lot of great men. And, you know, I've always tried to kind of use that to my advantage. Women are also sometimes overly thoughtful kind of thing. You know, what are we, you know, how's this going to affect everybody? What's going to happen, instead of just, you know, moving forward a lot of times. And again, I think that's just the difference between women and men. But I really don't view being a woman in this business or being a woman in any business as a disadvantage. We just have to figure out what our best approach is and do it as best we can. I'll tell you my one funny story. I was working with a financial advisor on a plan that he had, and he wanted to do something. And I was like, we are not doing that. That is not in the best interest of the client. This is why we shouldn't do it. These are all the reasons not to do it. And one of the wholesalers a few months later came to me and said, you know that guy, you remember when we were working on that plan? He goes, I went and visited with him again. And he said he was one of the smartest people you'd ever met, with the biggest B that he had ever met. He was so mad at me for not letting the client do something that was wrong. And I said, if that's the way he views me, then that's the way he views me. I was protecting his clients. So, you know, but we get that sometimes, and it's okay.
Yeah, chauvinism will always be part, unfortunately, of society. It's one of those things that you have to deal with. And thankfully, I think over the last 30 years, got a little bit less and less, but it'll always be there. How do you deal with, you know, the competition in the TPA world, and, you know, more importantly, clients understanding what you do? Because I've always felt that, you know, the problem that TPAs have, client really doesn't understand what they do. And, you know, the joke is they'll go across the street for $10 less because they don't understand that your work is different than somebody else's work, especially somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yep. And I 100% agree with that. The hardest part of this business is really showing under our value and people understanding what our value is, right? When they can go to that bundled provider and get the same services. But then when they have a problem, or they acquire a company, or they're getting acquired, or any of these other things that have happened, you know, with the last 2008 to 2011 and are going to happen again, they forget, you know, then that's why they need us. That's when they realize they need us and don't that. So it really is a struggle, honestly, to continually show who we are and our value. And the biggest message I always say to my staff is, you know, just be responsive, listen to that client, understand what their question is. Bring me in if you need to bring me in, if it's advanced. I mean, sometimes we have to include their CPA and their financial advisor, and other things are going on. But to have that consultative approach to the clients, to me, is what often shows the value, right? It's answering their quick question, but being there for them when they have that more difficult. And that also becomes hard because, you know, we could spend hours. Like, we had a client last year that was going through this acquisition, called to ask a simple question. It turned into a 25-hour consulting gig, and then we send them a bill and they're all mad about it. And I'm like, but we spent 25 hours. And if you had hired an attorney, you would have spent way more than the bill I'm sending to you.
Yeah.
So it's often, it's a hard conversation. It continues to be difficult, even in today's world. And in some cases, it's even more difficult today, right? Back in 1998, when we started, there wasn't a lot of bundle. There wasn't a lot of that kind of stuff. There wasn't that, and they needed us. You know, now I think it's even a harder conversation sometimes, and everybody's after the low fee. And I have to get paid for the work we do. If you want to call me and have my people answer your question, you have to pay a certain amount for us to be able to do that.
But do you think that plan sponsors are getting smarter, or is it just my assumption over the last few years, especially with fee disclosure, that they don't have that knee-jerk kind of response to the TPA? Oh, you're charging me, the next person I could go to save a couple $100. I don't think that, I just find that advisors and I think plan sponsors, you'll never be in a situation where they know everything. We'll never get to that.
Yeah.
Do you find
Yeah.
plan sponsors over the last 10 years maybe getting it more than they did back then?
I wouldn't say 10 years, but I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years for the most part. Yeah, I think you're entirely right that we've done a better job as an industry of helping people to understand the value we have, right? And who we are and what we can do for them. And, keeping the problem, part of the problem is, we sell a plan 3 years ago and we showed them all this value and did all this design work and all that kind of good stuff. And then, we don't show them that over the past couple of years, and they're like, well, why am I paying you? So it's continually kind of being in their face. And to me, like this year, which we all know has been a crazy year, I personally did, like, when CARES Act was out, within a week of that being out, we did a webinar for our clients, and we had about 35 to 40% of our clients attend one of our webinars on the CARES Act.
That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing in this day and age.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing to me that we had that many people, but they really were interested, wanted to know how it's going to affect their plan. I mean, we were getting calls of people, I need to terminate my plan. And one of the things I talked about when I did that webinar is, don't make a snap decision. Let's wait and see what happens. Like, don't be, but I felt I needed to address that. And that really kind of slowed that. But having that many of our clients care and attending a webinar was pretty darn amazing to me, that they're looking for our help.
Ever since 2012, fee disclosure regulations, I think, have had a dramatic effect on the business, especially the TPA business. Consolidation, how does that concern you? There's always, I can never see there'll be a time where there'll be only 5 TPAs left, 5 of the biggest behemoths left. But how do you see consolidation as a challenge, but even, I think, for a lot of people, maybe an opportunity?
I am viewing it as an opportunity. I think that sometimes it is challenging to compete against them. They have different resources than we have, right? They have whole marketing teams and huge marketing budgets and other things like that, right? But I personally view it as an opportunity. As those big ones are gobbling up the small ones in my market and other markets, right? It's creating some of that opportunity for us, for the advisors that know us, but maybe haven't used us because they had a relationship with this other one that now got gobbled up. And that's now not going as well. And so they come to us now and say, okay, well, I've known you for a number of years. I like you. I do this. I just never really had any opportunities. And now I have my clients complaining. So, to me, I think that's an opportunity for all of us small, mid-sized TPAs to really kind of capitalize on some of that if we do it right.
No, I mean, that's interesting. But, like I said, bigger is not better. And I think that a lot of them, the bigger they get, the more business they're going to say no to. They can only have so much. And it's just, I did talk to one of them, which leads to my next question about pooled employer plans. And I've yet to have a discussion with somebody who thinks that PEPs are going to be the greatest thing. I think that people who say that are in the MEP business, and this is just going to be a great thing. What are your thoughts about pooled employer plans? And is that something that you're going to consider, or is that something that, you see cannibalizing your business if you don't watch out?
Well, yeah. So, MEPs, I've done MEPs. We have some MEPs right now. It's not a huge part of our business. I've had some successful ones, and I've had a lot of unsuccessful MEPs. So I struggle with a few things with the PEP world. Like, I know it's coming. For sure it's coming. Everybody's talking about it. But what's the difference between the MEPs that we currently have in a lot of ways? For me as a TPA, a small to mid-sized TPA, people are like, well, aren't you going to start one? Well, how am I going to distribute that? How is that going to work? Because unless I can grow that to be a behemoth, I'm probably not going to make enough money at it. And I also struggle with the whole pricing part of that, right? I also struggle with, um, people always say that they get, buying power, but is it really cheaper? I mean, when I look at some of that, I think, is it really? Because as a TPA, I still have to kind of run those all as individual plans. I have to still do all the same work as I would do. The only advantage to a PEP or maybe a MEP is we might do a consolidated 5,500, right? So what is that really saving me in the grand scheme of life from my standpoint? Unless I have a bazillion of those plans, I'm not going to be able to charge less, really. Do you have a different thought?
No, I don't. It's consistent with what I think. And Bill Shorey's said you could get R6 into share class as a startup now, so no savings on the investment, because
Right.
Bill was my guest the last time out. Um, it, I remember in 2011, I was at Schwab Impact back when they used to invite me to speak at the national events before I somehow jokingly joined the blacklist and had to start my own events. I did a presentation. Well, it's a joke, but I don't know if it's a joke or I'm serious. It depends on the day. But I did a presentation with Terry Powers and his financial advisor that he works with, Montgomery. Is it Michael Montgomery, I believe? And we did a presentation on MEPS, and a TPA that I knew in Long Island. I used to work with him at another TPA, and we were talking about MEPS. And he said, I don't even think he saw my presentation, and he just said something like, "We're not interested in MEPS. We want clients that pay." Which I used to always joke because I used to always call him Dr. No, because anytime I had an idea for something or a potential client and brought it to this TPA, he would always say no. But I think he had a point in the sense that uh, I always joke that everybody who's ever said that they're going to make me rich in the retirement plan business never drew me a dime worth of business. And I believe that anybody who's ever said, "Oh, I have this contact. I work with this payroll provider, and they got 3,000 clients, and they work it, and they work the the Rolodex, which I guess today nobody knows what a Rolodex is anymore, and they say, I got 3,000 of their payroll clients. I'm going to reach out. This is a home run," and then they come back and they get like 2 or 3.
Yep.
It's always it's always trying to gather assets. And I think that the problem with PEPs is, if you're going to say that it's a cost-effective solution, you're lying to people, because unless you right off the bat have 25, $50 million worth of assets from the get-go, you're never going to have that savings until maybe year 5 or year 6. I mean, I work with the only successful 2 MEPs that I ever worked with. It took 5-6 years to build.
Yeah, and that's exactly true. And then, I also worry, as those MEPs grow a lot of times, and probably the PEPs too, like, what are we subjecting ourselves to with litigation? Like, you see all these people being sued for excessive fees and all that going on. And I think that's opening up, some of that really concerns me, right? And then somebody wrote in the chat, is it possible that PEPs will become complementary? I mean, isn't that how the big payroll providers try to sell it? Just come to us, it's easy, but it's not free. It's not, people have to make money to service their plan. We, as a TPA, we struggle with that all the time. Like, clients never want us to raise their fees because they're like, well, we're paying you, you're not doing any more. Well, you love the person that works on your plan and they want to raise every year and their health insurance costs have gone up. So I need to pay them more, which means I need to charge you more, right? But you have to wonder, nothing's free in this world. You're going to pay for it one way or the other. So I struggle with that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Lockton, they'll have their own PEP. They will be successful because they have the offices and the advisors to do that. The problem
Right,
is,
they have the resources, they have the distribution, they have all those kind of things that you need, right? Yep, I agree.
I remember back in the day, every advisory firm wanted a MEP, and they don't have that kind of business in order to support a MEP of its own.
Right, I agree.
So
just like a small TPA, we don't either. Like, we're not going to be able to support that kind of growing business. Now, if we work with a big record keeper, where they're going to record keep it, we're going to be TPA. Maybe it could work if they have the distribution, but are they going to come to somebody like me to do that? I mean, that's always the thing. And it's okay if they don't. I'm not kind of saying I want it, because I think it has its own challenges.
Yeah, and the funniest number is the DOL said with the advice they had about the PEP registration that they see, I think, 5,000 PEP providers, pooled plan providers, and I'm like, how much business do you think that's going to be? I mean, everybody's going to have
I
one
don't,
plan. Like, going to be a lot of hungry people.
yeah, I don't see that happening. I can't imagine there would be that many PPPs. I didn't hear that number, but uh, that's a lot to me.
I think it's a pie in the sky number anyway. I don't know if they actually
Yeah,
through. So,
yeah.
as a TPA, what are some of your favorite horror stories in terms of takeovers? Because I always have
Uh,
mine, the guy the
well,
people who had the DB plan that put all the money with Bernie Madoff. That's always one of my favorites that I've had to do.
I had a client in Las Vegas in 2011 that didn't make contributions for 18 months. When they came to us, and they were not my client, they came because the DOL caught them. And fixing that problem and having a weekly call with the Department of Labor was not my finest moment. I mean, it was fine for me. I helped them fix it and everything, but that was one of the craziest situations I have ever been involved with, because they basically used the money for other reasons. They were basically going bankrupt. Now they had all this employee deferrals that they never deposited. We had lost earnings calculations. We had all kinds of crazy stuff going on with that one. That's one of my favorite, craziest stories ever. I mean, I could go into tons of detail about that, but that's that was an amazing one. And it always worries me. Like, we watch our clients' deposits real closely, because I always worry that people do that. And it's still one of the biggest late deposits. It's still one of the biggest corrections we have every single year.
No, and that has been a big part of my business now. Like, I grew up back in the day when it was 15 days of the following month. That's what we relied on. And then all of a sudden, the Department of Labor woke up and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. That was just the maximum, and it really should be in as soon as possible. And I'm amazed by how many clients, and I had two big audits, both restaurant groups, multiple payrolls, multiple restaurants, different states. Like, you got a restaurant in New York, got a restaurant in Vegas, and it's just amazing how it goes through. But how do you, as a TPA, how do you follow that to make sure that your client is not doing that? Because a lot of times nobody discovers it until the auditor discovers it if the plan required an audit.
Yeah, we look at it, and when we pull up clients, we even kind of look at it now when we do distribution loan processing. Like, if they're with a big record keeper, right, and we get a distribution form we have to sign off on, we look to make sure that last deposit was made for the employee. So, like, if I terminated today, and payroll was last Friday, we look before we process it to make sure that that final payroll was in. And that's how we catch a lot of them, if that happens. Sometimes we don't catch it till we do the year-end work, those late deposits, but we try to catch them much earlier. Or the other thing that happens is a client calls us and says, hey, I was out of the office for a month on a leave, and nobody did the deposit. What do I need to do? What needs to happen here? How do I fix this? So, I'm not saying we catch all of them, but I think with technology and everything else going on right now, we catch a lot of them. And on plans that we're like 316 on, because we do some 316 work, we actually have projects set up where we can track. We know that client's payroll was last Friday, and it's somebody's job to go out there and make sure it got deposited. So we track it a lot better. Again, technology helps us with that now, right? Back in the day, that wouldn't have been possible. But
right.
That is one of the better things about today is we have a lot of technology, and if we use it correctly and use it to your best advantage, it really can help with a lot of those things.
So you're one of the TPAs that added a 316 service. How is that going? Because I know quite a few TPAs for some reason just did not want to do it, and I thought that they were throwing away money by not offering it.
Yeah, it's not a big part of our business, like as a percentage of
Right.
plans, but it is the 316 work we're doing is for bigger clients. It's a lot of our bigger clients who, for us being in Phoenix Metro, right, we're kind of a small market. It's a lot of our clients who have a few hundred employees, are still privately owned, have an HR department, but that business owner is worried that his HR department is doing everything they could, and they're willing to spend the money because it's not inexpensive. If you're a good 316, you need to be charging because you're taking on a lot of responsibility there. So it's not a big percentage of our overall plan business, but we have a pretty nice group that we do regular 316 work on, and I really enjoy doing that. um, I don't think it'll ever really come downstream to our really small clients, our 10 and 15 employee plans. Like I don't know that they need it, but that kind of group that, a couple hundred employees, maybe 400 to 1,000 employees, they're the ones who really do it. The other group that's been using it is our nonprofits, right? A lot of our nonprofits use it because they have a board and they don't have an owner and they want that protection. And so it's definitely been something we've been doing, definitely been growing. You have to have everything set up though. You have to know what you need to look at, what your responsibilities are, what you have to do. And I took the approach that, no, this is our service. This is what it costs. I can't let you pick and choose, because then how do I determine which client I'm doing this for and which client I'm doing that for? So really for us, we kind of went all in, and the clients we have, we're doing all those services for.
I think the biggest problem that I see with 316 is that unlike a 338 service, it could be out there in terms of, there are 316s out there, which I'm still surprised will not sign the 5500, which I think to me is one of the easiest things to do.
For
Uh,
sure.
so
Why
how,
would I not sign it? I'm preparing it anyway, so why would I not sign it?
yeah,
You know?
I don't, it's just the interesting concept that there is no like standard as to what a 316, a 338 advisor I know is supposed it's going to be somebody who has full fiduciary control, over the investment, process of the plan. 316 is just like, it's like all over the place.
Yeah, it 100% is. I totally agree. I think though, with those clients, for me, they're like some of my really great clients. They really come to us for advice. They really, really recognize our value. We also take the extra steps with them. We make them have at least an annual meeting, although with most we have a semi-annual meeting. We review everything with their plan. We talk about what happened in their audit, anything we need to change for next year, all those kind of things that I think are just so important. If you're going to be a 316 and you're going to do that you have to do, but it gives us those extra touch points. And to me, they're just much stickier clients.
So when you started in your own 1998, it was pretty much yourself. How is it like dealing with employees, finding, and to me, most importantly, finding good employees? I think, because again,
Yeah.
I've been here 22 years already, which I can't believe, but like the first almost 10 years working for TPAs. And if for the two that I worked for, I mean, there was no training for some of these 401k administrators. It was like, here you are, here's a computer, why don't you learn this thing? And just like no help. How do you find, quality employees? Because then again, there are people I've seen have 20 years experience and don't know what they're doing. So how do you deal with, that?
Yeah. No, 100% agree with everything you just said. It is definitely one of our biggest challenges is finding solid, good employees. We do a lot. So we're still fairly small. We have about 30 employees, right? We hire a lot of entry level and train them. So they work with an administrator or an analyst on our staff, right? Learning, scrubbing census, maybe doing distribution loan processing. We teach them certain things with the hope that if they catch on, right, they would move up up the ladder, it gives them a career path. That has worked fairly successfully for us. But sometimes you also do need to just hire somebody who has experience, and that is really, really hard. We hired somebody earlier this year who I would tell you, we loved her, great personality, but what we quickly discovered is that clearly she did not ever work for a good TPA. She didn't know nearly as much as we thought she should know. And it became pretty apparent pretty quickly, but that hurts you. I mean, in any type of small business, hiring the wrong employee hurts you. So it's really, really hard. We're looking for a couple people right now because we thankfully need to replace a person, and we have some growth, so we need another person to kind of help for next year. We actually hired a recruiter to help us, which is not my preference, but there definitely are some now that work in our business and have relationships in our business, which I'm pretty happy about. So, and I think that whole ball game has changed a little bit too, at least with the one I'm using, but it is still one of definitely the most, employees are definitely the most challenging part of any business, TPA
Right.
or otherwise, right? I mean, you live and die by them. I mean, they're the ones who represent you every single day. And so, I love all my folks but I do a lot to try to keep them happy and work with them and all that too. So
You would think with all the consolidation, you'd have more candidates because through consolidation, people do lose their jobs. But the problem is you can never find good
yeah.
people. You can find people, but you can never find good quality people. That still is always in demand.
Right. Because if they're good, they do what I do and do whatever we can to keep them happy and keep them here, right? It's like one of my jobs before I left Pennsylvania. It was, the late 80s, and they were paying me quite well. It was really hard. It would have been really hard for me to leave and go make that amount of money anywhere else. And I stayed there, because of that. So, it's not all about money today is the other thing I've realized. We just had the October 15th deadline, right? And
Right.
we were scrambling like most TPAs to make sure all of our clients' stuff got out and everything happened. And I had a couple people who really stepped up, and I went to them and I was like, do you want bonuses? Do you want extra days off? What do you want? You tell me what you want, because I'm willing to do either for you to thank you for helping us. So I think you have to just know what they want.
Yeah, I mean, I jokingly say, the reason I never hired an employee because I was an employee once too. And it's just an interesting thing to manage. Last question.
Yeah.
COVID,
Sure.
what do you think are going to be the effects that once we have a vaccine, hopefully next week, which of course it won't be next week, but how do you see the effects that we've gone through during COVID that is still going to go and still have an effect on our business after we're out of all of us and life can come back to somewhat normal?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the positives that came out of COVID was really the ability for everybody to work from home, right? That became a lot more accepted, which I'm not unhappy about by any means. Like we were, most TPAs, I think, were kind of moving that way anyway. And even when you asked me the question before, I meant to say too about hiring new employees, like at least in today's world, I don't only have to look for employees here in Phoenix. I can look for employees anywhere who can work remotely, right? So it does give us a little bit broader pool with that, since most of us are set up that way. So I think that's the positive. The thing I'm still concerned as a TPA and as a business owner about with relation to COVID is I still think that there's a lot of companies that are going to end up closing their doors. I mean, I think we're going to have a lot of those partial plan terminations and a lot of plan terminations in general going on. And how hard sometimes those are to deal with. Like if an employer just disappears. I mean, what do we do? How do we handle that? When they have a partial plan termination and now people have to be 100% vested. I mean, thankfully, a lot of our smaller plans are safe harbor already, so they're 100% vested, so it's kind of a non-issue. but still just all those additional things we have to consider. And I don't think we've seen all the fallout from COVID yet with relation to that.
Yeah, there's still businesses that are staggering, and like here in New York, they still never opened up the amusement parks, like the small amusement parks off down here on Long Island that's been struggling. The restaurants in New York City, it's still going to be right now. They just reopened and it's only 25% capacity. And it's amazing what's going on. And the partial terminations are a headache because of, how you deal with, the shutdown of a certain business. And then you have the problems where, I've seen from the TPA side when the plan went from safe harbor match and then, changed it mid-year, and the ramifications of that, and there has to be true up and all that kind of fun
we
stuff.
were just talking about that this morning, because we had definitely a handful of clients who went from safe harbor match and stopped their match mid-year, and we're like, we're going to go to them and be like, do you want us to run a mid-year test? Like, do you even know like what's going to happen to you at your end? You've been safe harbor your whole life of your plan, and now you're not. So I don't want you to be totally surprised, but it's additional things that we have to consider also as TPAs of what our clients need, right? I mean, it's gonna, I still think in my mind, the rest of this year, all of 2021, and even probably into 2022, we're still gonna have some stuff going on, and that's gonna kind of depend when all this ends. So it's definitely something like back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, right? I was happy that we stayed even with our plan count, right? We had clients terminating and we were bringing some new business on enough to stay even. And I think that's what I have to hope for again. I mean, maybe with some of the consolidation, we'll grow, which would be great. That may bring us some business, but as far as our existing clients, I'm still worried about a lot of them.
Before we go, Greg, yes, I know Adventureland is offering concerts, and that is who I was referring to on Long Island that is struggling as an amusement park, because they had this whole thing complaining that they had this guidance, they got ready, and then they couldn't reopen.
Well, so, California's governor won't even let Disney.
I know. We were there. I was there about a year and a half ago, and of course, I was at Disney World for a conference, my own conference, and then I left on Wednesday and they closed Sunday. But yeah.
And I was in Disney World as well until that Friday, and then they closed on Sunday. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. The world was ending, or whatever. So anyway, Theresa, I appreciate for you coming on.
Thank
you. For everybody who maybe missed at the beginning, it will be up on YouTube and hopefully tonight. So I thank everybody for attending. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Ari. I really appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay, bye.